Hi, everyone. This is Angela Garcia, and welcome back to Empowering Conversations Rising Above Hate. I am super excited today for today's guest, Suman, and I'm excited to hear your story, excited to hear what you have to share. And let's start off by you introducing who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Angela. My name is Suman Kapur. I live in Northern Virginia. I am a first generation born US citizen. My parents emigrated here in the 60s from India. And so all my life, I have been really bridging two cultures, and that has really created the person who I am. Growing up, it was things like at home, mom and dad ruled, and what they said went. But
Mhm.
they encouraged us when we were out in school and with friends to ask questions, to really move away from the stereotypes that Indians are submissive. But at home, it was a whole different story. So I really did, and I continue to really live in two different worlds. One that is very culturally rich in the Indian heritage, and two is here in America, how I'm raising my children. I am married to an American. I am not married to an Indian. So really dealing with that dual cultural life. I'd say one of my bigger struggles right now is how do I bring my Indian heritage into how my children are growing up, right? Again, I'm not married to an Indian, so he's super supportive. But a lot of that then falls on me and my parents. So we work through all of that, but really a lot of that is, it's really defined who I am in the work that I do. I was a mediator before I had children. So again, it's the idea of educating people, finding common ground. How do we learn to be together and live as harmoniously as possible, or work as harmoniously as possible? And now I have a business of my own called Well Balanced Solutions. It started as a virtual assistant business, but it has now moved over to leadership consulting and coaching. So again, the idea is where I'm helping organizational leaders improve communication and conflict management skills so that they can work with their team, by really having some very productive team conversations. Again, that same thread of let's learn who we are, let's use communication to its best ability so that we can all work together. So that thread has really carried all through my life.
I love that you shared that as a first generation American, it is hard to figure out how we embrace both cultures.
Yes.
So, my dad is from Mexico, my mom is American. And it was, I mean, I'm sure it's probably harder for you to be able to do this, but my dad used to send us to Mexico for the
Mm-hmm.
entire summer.
Right?
Yeah, it was like,
Yep.
you're going to go to Mexico. And because my grandparents didn't speak English, my in laws don't speak English, my husband is also from Mexico. There is, in a way, it's harder to keep the culture going when you're not around it as much. And I find that my boys, they're not bilingual. They
Mm-hmm.
lost their Spanish, and we didn't, but it was because my dad was constantly taking us over there, and things aren't the
Yes.
same anymore. So we can't do that. So I
Yes.
can totally relate to you sharing that.
Yep. And you're right. So even growing up, while all my friends traveled the US over the summer, we went to India and we went abroad because that's where my family was, right? My parents, again, because they emigrated here, they were one of the first to come here. My grandparents were still overseas, my cousins were overseas. And so we went overseas every summer. Um, Part of that assimilation, while my parents spoke to us in Hindi and Punjabi, I always responded back in English. I understood them, but responded back in English. And now my kids, they know words here and there. But interestingly enough, I will say one of the benefits of this pandemic is my mom is teaching my children how to speak Hindi. Every week they have virtual lessons. And so they are now learning. And actually, to some point, they actually know a lot more than I do because now they're actually getting these formal classes with my mom. But, you know, it is definitely a huge challenge, you know, and that is one of the things that I've struggled with a lot is the culture, and just like the Mexican culture is so rich and so beautiful. You want to hold on to it, but with each generation, especially when you're not in the motherland, it really does separate with each generation. So we're doing the best that we can, you know, and good for you also, just really doing the best that you can.
Yeah, we went to Mexico this in December. We went for 2 weeks, and it was the first time the boys had Christmas in Mexico, which looks completely different from the way things are here. And it was, I love that they had that experience because that's the experience I grew up having.
Right.
That's the way things were, and so just introducing them to, you know, this is what it's like. And it's not, you know, here in the United States, most families, if you think about it, or maybe it's what we share on social media, there's like 20 gifts under the Christmas tree and there's all of this stuff. And I didn't grow up receiving Christmas gifts. Like we were taught we're going to spend time together. This is what it is. We're going to Mexico to be with family. And of course, that tradition broke when I had my kids. And so teaching them that now, and well, for the last couple of years, we have been very minimal when it comes to that. Like, that's not what it's about for us. And when we went to Mexico, they were like, "Mom, this is so different."
Right.
You know, it's just different. And I think being able to go back to the roots is an amazing feeling. But also it's like, wow, how much is lost? Because I don't know what it's like in India, but I feel like here in the United States, we're go, 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 go. Always rushed, always the next thing. We can't be present and focus on just family.
Yes.
And one thing that even the boys have noticed, Mom, when we're over there, everyone is together. It seems like time goes by in a different way.
Yeah.
So definitely a different experience.
Absolutely. It's a very similar experience. It's the same, you know, you go there and family just starts coming. They hear you've arrived and it's all of a sudden family is coming out of the woodwork, which is fantastic. And I remember things like we would be still visiting family at 10 o'clock at night. And of course you go to everyone's house and they're going to feed you. And we're constantly, I'm like, I'm so full. And my mom was like, well, you have to keep eating. And it was like, how many more people's houses are we going to? But that's the fun, right? But that is what is so much fun. Here, everything is planned. Will you be home? You know, you can't just stop by. It's so organized and so planned, which again, it's like you're not living the moment, right? So I wholeheartedly agree with you on all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, because I know that you also are doing interviews where you guys are, you ladies are discussing racism and discrimination. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing, because I would love to share that link in this interview so that other people, I feel like as many resources as we can give, it's amazing. And so do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have a colleague, Tiffany Castagno. She and I met just maybe 2.5 months ago and hit it off amazingly. And we were talking about the George Floyd incident or murder. And we really felt we needed to do something. I mean, you can protest, you can write letters. There's so many things you can do, but it never feels that it stays the course, right? At some point, the protests stop. At some point, the mail-ins stop and the write-ins and all of that sort of stuff. It eventually goes back to normal. So she and I talked about doing a series. It originally started around race in the workplace. So she and I talked a lot about the experiences. She's an HR consultant. And so we really talked a lot about what does it mean? How do you have difficult conversations? How do you really find yourself present in these conversations and really sit through your discomfort? And we talked about how difficult this work is. And the conversation in the series has really taken a life of its own. We now talk about racism in children, racism in religion. We have guest speakers now, which was not, you know, we didn't start off that way, but we just finished our first guest speaker last week, and we have another guest speaker coming on this Wednesday. And so we've also now added unrecorded sessions because we were hearing people saying, well, we see that little recording sign and we're a little nervous to say things because we might get back to our boss or to our families and to our friends and we're not comfortable. So it's really morphed into a place where you can come, get some education, hear different perspectives in a very safe place. We have not had very many super controversial conversations. We had one who's a gentleman whose perspective was different than what mainstream perspective is like, but everyone carried themselves very respectfully. And so that's the idea, is just to come on, hear different perspectives, have a conversation, and we have promised everyone we're here until the end, as long as it needs to go on. So I'm happy to share a link. We're actually changing our days in September. It's going to be on Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern. And so you can always find me on LinkedIn because that's where I post the link. Tiffany does as well. And so we'll share all of that information with you. And I'd love if you can share it with your audience. It would be fantastic.
Yes, I would love to. I love how you shared that he had a different perspective, but everyone was able to carry themselves. Because I feel like that's what's happening. There's so many different points of views, and it's almost like my view is the only way, and I don't care what you say. And for some reason, I feel like disrespecting you is going to make it better.
Right.
Like,
and again, I understand, and we talk about this a lot. Everyone is in a different point of their journey in dealing with this issue of racism. It's the first time that I am seeing it really feel different, right? It's not the same as it's been in the past, where there has been an uprise and it has quickly dwindled away. This uprise is still continuing, right? The conversations are still happening. You're having white people saying, oh my gosh, like, there is something inherently wrong here. Like, people, those aha light bulbs are going off. It's feeling very different. And so we talk about that, is that everyone is at a different point in their journey. Someone might just be starting their journey, and someone might have answered 1,000 times, why do you wear your hair natural? Or why, is it like this in your community? And we need to be respectful of where people are in their journeys. And we need to be able to provide that space for them, for someone who might be new in the journey, to say, hey, here are all the things that I've read. Here's what I'm hearing. Do you have time to have a conversation with me? Because I still have questions. And if you're at the end or towards the end of your journey and frustrated as you are, I encourage everyone to say, yeah, let me find the time. Today may not be a good time. I really had a bad day, or I had a bad encounter with someone, and today's not the right time. Yeah. But if we shun people away, then all it does is someone's going to continue walking around ignorant. Yeah. Someone is going to continue saying, well, that's the stereotype, that, if I can't talk to them, oh, well, there we go. Right. So I get it. I am frustrated. I've been asked 1,000 million times the same 5 or 6 questions about being Indian, and it's exhausting and it's frustrating. But I come again from a place of education that if I don't do it, I run the risk of that individual saying, oh, well, I'm not going to Google it. It's too much time for me. Or, oh, well, see, here we go again. If they're not going to spend the time, why should I? So again, it's being respectful of where people are in their journeys, but yet finding the time to have these conversations, because it's actually happening now. Look at you and look at me, and we're not the new, we're not the only ones who are new to bringing this conversation to the forefront. There are so many people out there who are now taking to social media and having these conversations. So we have to encourage that as much as we can.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I would like for you to share, because I feel like this is the time where we want to shine light on what happens to other people. I know a lot of us saw the visual of George Floyd being murdered, and it's not just George Floyd, right? There's Breonna Taylor, and there's several others that we are seeing. And I feel like that's one of the things that's bringing so much movement is that people are seeing it. People are hearing what's happening. It's not just what was in the history books, what we're learning in class. It's like, this is 2020 and it is currently happening. We can turn on the news and we can see that that's happening. We can get on social media and we can see. Can you share with me a story or an experience that you had where you experienced racism or discrimination as it being, you know, first generation Indian here in the United States?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So, you know, one of the things that happens a lot is the interplay of these words, right? So we have racism and stereotypes and racial discrimination. And there's a lot of gray that happens with these words. And so while I've experienced racism, I will say I've experienced a lot more stereotypes in these conversations, particularly microaggressions. And there's so many, it's crazy. I get things like, well, you don't act Indian, right? You like to go party. You like to hang out with your friends. That's not an Indian behavior. Or I get things like, well, you don't sound Indian. Really, you're Indian? You don't sound Indian. It's like, okay, or you speak English so clearly. It's, you know, again, it's those stereotypes that are formed and happening out there. I'd say one of the bigger ones is, oh, you're Indian, so you must be a doctor. No, I'm not a doctor. And so it's, you know, it's those sorts of things which I chuckle at, but as the conversations happen, I realize that these really are these powerful microaggressions that I don't think people understand the intent and the problem that happens. You know, and again, it's meant to be a compliment. Oh, so you don't sound Indian. In their mind, they're giving me a compliment. But what they don't understand is that it's not really a compliment. It's taking a dig at my heritage, right? That there is a particular sound to be Indian or a particular appearance to be Indian. You know, it's all of that sort of stuff. The intention might be well intended, but there really is that they're not aware of those hidden messages and the impact of those sorts of statements. So I've had a lot of those. I was talking, you know, just now even saying the biggest one I got, when do you get the dot tattooed to your forehead? Well, it's not tattooed to my forehead. It's actually, you know, originally started as a symbol of marriage. And it is now, of course, moved on to more of a fashion statement. So it's having those sorts of conversations that I've answered again 1,000 million times, but I will continue answering them because I want people to understand when they say things like, oh, so you're Asian Indian, you must be a doctor. No, not all Indians are doctors. It might seem that way because, again, the bubble that you live in is this small. But when you look at a country of over 1 billion people, not everyone is a doctor, right? And it's the same. Yes, again, you know, Indian Asians and Asians, I think in general, again, here I am stereotyping, but in general, you know, the stereotype is educated, wanting to go to school, the elite colleges and things of that nature. Again, that is because you look at a bubble this small, but for most Asians, that's not the case. It's only when you start to look at it compared to other minority groups that it might look that way. And it's because of those stereotypes, those are pushed so much ahead. But when you look at it, the number of Black Americans or Latinos, they are just as successful, if not more successful in certain areas. So again, it's those stereotypes that really hurt the conversation and have people stuck where they are.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't know that. I knew it was not tattooed. I didn't know exactly what it symbolized.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So I remember my mom, as when I was a young girl, just take lipstick and you put it on. And as you know, years go on, business people got smarter and they made little stickers and you can put those on. And again, it started off as a symbol of marriage. And now it's just part of the outfit. You know, it's like you put on earrings and a necklace, you put on, it's called a bindi, and you just put on a bindi and there you go. You know, now they've come with crystals and different shapes and colors and glittery, and it's great. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And I love that. If I could live the perfect life in my world, I would be traveling and living in different countries and experiencing the culture like that. I would die the happiest person on the world. If anybody wants to give me $1 billion,
and not go as a tourist, but go as someone who lives there. Exactly. Just live there, you know, and yes, wholeheartedly agree. So we did it. So going back to our trips to India, we ended up doing it backwards. We would go and live the culture every day, you know, go and stay with my grandparents and my uncles and my aunts and cousins. And the last trip we made as a family with my parents and my sister, we went in 2000, and we actually we went as tourists. We made a conscious decision to go as tourists, and it was amazing. I mean, I think we've got some amazing memories and pictures, and, you know, but again, just to see the country from two different perspectives. How when you live there every day, you see things differently, and it's the perspective and the lens that you have. But when you go as tourists, again, it's just as beautiful, but it's a different view of the country. But I'm with you 110%. If somebody wants to give me some of that cheese, I'll take it and I'll go travel. You want me to write a book? I'll write a book too.
When we went, you know, I've gone to Mexico my whole life, and it's the same thing. We stay with my uncle. These last couple years, I've been married for 12 years, but when we went, I think 5 years ago for the first time, my husband hadn't been since he had left Mexico, which was when he was 9. But 4 or 5 years ago we went, and again, you go and you're staying with family, so you're in the culture, we're staying there. But then December, we decided to go on a bus tour, and I was shocked, just because it's the northern part of Mexico, Chihuahua. I didn't realize that there was as many tourists as there was. So we went on the bus tour, which I didn't even know existed, and I was like, wow, there's so many tourists, like people actually come on vacation here. And then you start Googling and you're like, oh, there's all this stuff to do that I had no idea.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, you have a biracial family.
Yes.
What is it like, especially right now during this time, raising biracial kids? What kind of conversations are you finding yourself having to have with them that maybe a typical, or people who have been here in the United States for a long time, because I mean, we're a country of immigrants, right? But if you've been here for generations and generations, what is it like right now? You know, you see the murder of George Floyd, you see all of these things that are happening. What kind of conversations are you having? What is happening in your community right now?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a difficult question, right? Because it's a very different, it's a different time. So my husband is Black, and, you know, in my mind, that was no big deal. We had children and nothing. My parents, one of the things they really encouraged is they wanted us to have a Hindu wedding, which my husband was very supportive of. And then they asked when we had children if we would give them Hindu names, and he was super supportive about that, right? So again, we tried to find names that were easy to say for an American, and because he had to be able to pronounce his children's names, but he was fantastic about it. And we really, didn't think beyond that. And it wasn't until Trayvon Martin got killed that my heart stopped, because my son was 8. And I said, oh my gosh, that could be my son. He was out playing, nothing, right? He was playing. There was nothing, and my kids played outside all the time. And I just literally stopped, and I looked at my husband, I said, oh my gosh, how are we going to share? We have to tell him, because this is what's happening in his world, and I don't want somebody else to ask him something. So of course, as an 8-year-old and a parent of an 8-year-old, we shared that, that this had happened. and that sometimes good people get hurt. You know, we had to still protect him. He was 8,
Yeah.
a child. And he asked questions. Well, you know, mommy, you know, he was just playing. Why did this happen? And so again, we had to let him know these things were happening, but reassure him as best as we could. My son is now 15 and a half, and he is out there. He saw the video, and he said, how can this keep happening?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had the conversation, but I would say that one of the sadder points for me is, of course, he is now getting his driver's license. He's in the midst of having a permit. The first thing he says to me is, I'm not sure I want to drive. And here I am thinking, why? Oh my gosh, what a milestone. How amazing. What do you mean? I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. He says, mommy, what if I get pulled over? And again, my heart sunk, right? I am an Asian American. I am not a Black mom. I am not, right? And so here I am jumping for joy, and it was my son who brought me back down saying, what if I get pulled over?
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You're right, sweetheart. Absolutely right. You know, there is no right answer. I cannot say to you that you will come home safely to me. I said, I can't say that to you. And of course, I am tearing up, having a very difficult.
I'm tearing up. I'm like, I can't imagine having to say that.
It's awful. He's 15, right? And so all we could say to him was, whether you believe what is happening is wrong, you have to listen. I need you to come home to me every night. So no matter what they say to you, even if you believe it is 1,000% wrong, you keep your mouth shut and you do what you are being told to do. Because when you come home, we will then deal with the situation. We will then go to the police department. We will then reach out to whatever community leaders are out there and let them know. We will get on the media. We will do everything that we possibly can to let the community know of the wrong that happened. But we want to do it with you at our side, not with you in a casket, right? These are the conversations. And so, again, he is here with me. We continue to practice driving, but I know that is not something that his white friends have to think about. That is nothing, that's not even what his Indian friends have to think about. Because of the brown skin, the assumption is, oh, terrorists, right? That's what we have as Indian brown skin. That's what we deal with is, oh, you're brown, you must be a terrorist, right? And, you know, we get the looks as we now imagine as a Black father and an Indian mother getting on an airplane with our biracial children. They're like, oh my gosh, which stereotype do we go with today? Do I clutch on and pray that this person is going to go and blow up a plane? Or is it, here it is, a Black individual, and do I clutch my purse and do I not want to sit near them, right? And so unfortunately, my kids get the brunt of both, types of stereotypes and racism that comes to them. But again, I just continue we have the conversations. He is he's actually participated in our series as a guest. He will sit there and listen, and he's asked the guests who are there, he'll ask questions. He wants to understand what this is all about. And, we have the conversations. He will share things that happen in school. He's also confused, right? Because there are a lot of confusing things. I will say, even bringing him up, we would say things like, don't be the loudest in your group. Don't draw attention to yourself. I'm very confident that his white friends' parents are not telling their children the same thing, right? Because again, if anything happens, the loudest one is the one that gets pulled, if you're brown, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not brown, and even if you're the quiet one sitting there, you were the brown kid sitting there, and most likely they will come to you and say something's happened. So we talk a lot about, and that's not to say don't be who you are, right? He is very strong in who he is. He is very confident on who he is on both cultures. It is more of what happens on the outside. I mean, he's been to local protests. He's having conversations with his friends. He's come to me a number of times and say, oh my gosh, Mom, I cannot let this go. So-and-so continues to say this. And I have to tell him, hey, as much as you want to change their mind, if they're not ready to have their mind changed, you have to take a step back and move on to somebody else, because there will be someone who wants to hear what you have to say. And so he's very confident in who he is. It just comes back to, we need him to come home every night. And again, that is not the conversation you have with the white children and the white parents. They're not having those same conversations. No. I doubt they're having that conversation at all, right? And so that is sort of how things are different in our house. And with my daughter, so she's 10, she knows a little. Again, we work hard to protect her childhood, but with her, we deal with natural hair. She loves her curls, and we were very conscious about that from birth, right? Yeah. We were always talking about her beautiful curls and letting her wear them as naturally as possible. I had people say to us with her growing up, things like, oh, so are you gonna like straighten her hair? Or her hair just seems so unruly. Are you gonna do anything with it? And I looked at them and said, please don't say that to my daughter. She needs to embrace who she is. She needs to love herself. And if part of her is those beautiful curls. So yes, we struggle with taking care of her hair. I am learning. She is learning. We are learning this together now. But you know, where she is right now, she loves her curls. And for a 10-year-old girl, that's where I need her to be right now.
Exactly. And I love those curls.
Yes.
I love those curls.
Girl, she's got some gorgeous corkscrew curls, and she proudly wears them. And she's a competitive gymnast, so we do have to tie them up, but we have figured out different ways. We've got some twists in her hair, and she loves them. So that is
learned how to take care of her hair. Oh, that is so
I'm
awesome.
Still learning how to take care of her hair.
You know, as I was listening to you, because I was going to ask you about your daughter, so thank you for sharing about her as well. When I was listening to you, I thought, wow, that's not the conversation. I can't imagine having to tell my kids, you know, be quiet and you get pulled over because I need you to come home. And I think that those are things that we forget as moms, like the conversations that are happening in some homes. And you know, it's difficult. As I was listening to you, my heart just kept sinking, because I thought, I don't have to have that conversation with my kids. You know, I don't. It's, of course, there's different things that are happening in the Mexican culture, but it's definitely not the same. Definitely not the same. And I hope and I pray that people can see that, and we can be more understanding about what is happening and the fear that is behind that. Because as a mom, I hope when people listen to this, they stop and they realize, like, that is true. I didn't know that, or I didn't understand that. And these are the conversations that are happening. I think as moms, you know, the natural fear might be like, don't drink and drive, or something like that, but it's not the same fear. The fear that you have is not what, in general, most moms would feel like, you know, if your kid's going out to a party or, you know, something like that.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that is one thing that we don't hear as much. And I think it's not something, unless you have, you know, Black friends or friends from a different culture or biracial friends, that you can say, hey, what is happening? How can I hear this? And thank you. And I'm so sorry that you even have to go through something like that, because I feel like it's very, very unfair that that's even the conversation that has to happen. I can't imagine being a 15-year-old boy saying, I don't want to drive.
Yeah. And that was one of the first things. And again, you know, it's one of the things that I hope people who are listening here, or just in general conversations, just because it doesn't happen in your house doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think part of the solution, or part of getting to a point where we can all live cohesively together, is just understanding that just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening, and doesn't mean it's not a problem, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you fix it? How do we resolve these problems? And it's not going to happen. This is ingrained in every aspect of life. You look at, everything, workplace, healthcare, schools. This is hundreds and hundreds of years of systemic racism that has to change, but it's going to change by having conversations, and it's going to change by just having a level of empathy, by understanding, hey, this may not be happening to me, but holy crap, it's happening to someone else, and how scary must that be?
Yeah, it could be my neighbor. It could be, as a child in my student school. It's happening a lot more than what we think.
Exactly.
And I know you kind of just answered the last question that I wanted to ask you, but what conversations can we do, or not even conversations? I know there's protests, there's conversations happening, there's letters that we can write, but what other things can we do so that our kids are not having this conversation 20 years from now, or our grandkids are not having to have this conversation of racism, of discrimination, of Blacks feeling attacked? Like, it's not even just Blacks, but just right now that's what's happening.
Right.
What can we do, in your opinion?
Yep. So again, I think it depends on where you're coming from. So I encourage white people to, again, just because it's not happening in your house doesn't mean it's not happening. So what can you do to be part of that solution? Have the conversations. Do some self-reflection. Your conversations, they include microaggressions. Be aware of your biases. Like, really be conscious of what you're doing and what you're saying. How could that impact others around you? If you see something wrong, are you saying something, right? Are you walking away and letting it continue? Even if it's in your family, as difficult as it is, could you maybe write an email or say, hey, I really need to have a conversation. It's going to be really hard. Know that I love you, but I need to have a conversation about something I heard you say to so-and-so, right? So really come from a place of genuinely wanting to change it. There's so many resources out there, so many books, so many groups like this that you can come on and listen to. There's a lot out there, but you have to make a conscious effort to want to change it. And what does that mean? So that's, for the white people. And then with each, other group that's out there, Black community, the Latino community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, and within the Asians, we've got so many different groups within that. But again, be conscious of what's happening. I know a lot of cultures have discrimination within their own culture. I know in the Indian community, dark versus light, right? That's a huge conversation we have in the Indian community. I know it happens in the Black community, right? And so it
happens in the Mexican community.
Right, so within our own communities, we need to come together and we need to say, it's gotta stop. Because, how do we expect other communities to look at us when we are segregating and separating and having these comments within our own community? And so again, it's really taking a genuine look as to what your role can be. And it's, even if you impart and have a conversation with one person, it's a huge step, because that one person is now hearing a different perspective, right? And that's huge, because that didn't happen an hour before the conversation. So look at it that way. Take those baby steps. As I mentioned earlier, be respectful of where people are in their journeys. If you are new to the journey, find someone I'm always willing to have a conversation. So if anybody is out there, so long as you've done some reflection, right? I don't want to. it's not beneficial if you come and say, here are my list of questions. Can you just answer? How does this work? That's not beneficial, and that doesn't make for a productive conversation. But if you come to me and say, you know, I read an article that said this, and I read a book about this, and I watched a movie that talked about this, and I still have questions. Can you find a time for us to talk? And are you willing to talk to me? Because I'm still confused, or there's some gaps and some holes. If somebody comes to me to talk to me that way and want to have a conversation, wholeheartedly, I'm open. But I don't want to be somebody's teacher from ground zero, right? And so I think there's a lot that can happen out there. And I also say, don't give up. So if you've caught somebody on a bad day and they're like, no, I'm not having this conversation, please, I'm done. That's okay. Respect that, but find somebody else, right? Just don't stop trying. And then I think if everyone just comes from a place of genuine love, it really, really can make an impact. You know, voting is another huge thing. Vote. Don't vote based on party. Vote based on what everyone seems to be talking about: values, love, empathy. We need to come together as a nation looking at those qualities first, and then everything will trickle down, right? Unless our people of the country come together as one, we're not going to be able to lift each other up. And right now, I definitely feel very divided. And we need to heal together as a people. So I ask, when you go to vote, that people think about values, empathy, love, unity. Think of those before you think about who's taking away something from someone, right? Because that's not how the world lives. We don't take away. There's plenty out there for everybody.
Yes.
It's a matter of we are lifting everybody up together. So those are some suggestions that I have. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but if you can have a conversation, even if it leads to agreeing to disagree, you're at least getting somebody to think. Because the fact that they said, you know what, can we just agree to disagree? That means they were thinking about it.
Yes.
Right?
I love that.
Yep. And so it's still, and maybe you then say, perfect, we can agree to disagree right now, but can we come back in a month and let's see what happens? Let's go back, have our own, do a little bit more reading, do a little bit more talking with other people, and then let's come back. Don't stop having the conversations.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one thing that I always say, let's agree to disagree. We don't have to bash each other and do the things that are happening, because we are a divided country right now. And it's very sad to be raising our kids in this time. Me and my husband were saying how, you know, we're raising our kids through a lot right now. It's not just a pandemic. It's it's everything. I feel like we got everything in like 1 year.
Yes. Yes.
We need to like move back and start over or something. But it was like, I feel like history is repeating itself like times 10, all in a matter of like 6 months.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of conversation, you know, even things like schools are changing their names. Understand why that is. Understand, right? You may not believe it. You may not support it. People will say, well, instead of using the $1 million to change the name of a school and everything that goes with changing the name, why can't we use the $1 million elsewhere? Understood. But think about what it means for students to come to a school that's named after someone who owned slaves, or named after someone who was not pushing forth Christian values, right? And so think about it that way. Understand what it means, genuinely, truly means to defund the police. Understand what that means. It doesn't mean we're ending the police department, right? It is not that at all. Do the research. Don't understand what it means to support Black Lives Matter. It doesn't mean I don't support the police. Understand through your own as neutral as possible lens. Get rid of all the things that you've known and push away everything, and really find the time to understand what these things mean. Because I think once we push aside everything that we might have grown up knowing, and now try to come in with a clear lens, and it's hard, it's not easy. I'm not saying this is going to be something that someone can say, oh, I am now done. It's not woo-woo stuff. It's not like, oh, you know, magically I now support it. It's a lot of hard work.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it's things that your parents might have taught you or your grandparents might have taught you, right? And these are ingrained in who you are. But even if it means putting all of that aside to genuinely try to understand what everyone is talking about, do the work. And you will find out that nobody is taking away the white culture. Nobody is taking away and putting one culture above of another culture. Everyone genuinely just wants to all live and have equality, right? Be a part of everything. Be a part of leadership at the business table. Be a part of getting into Harvard, or even having Harvard as an option to go. You know, it's everywhere. Walking into a department store and not being followed, right? It goes in every aspect of life. We all just want to be as equal as we can, and we can literally all be equal if we take the time to understand what's happening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today, because I know you're Eastern Standard Time, so we're completely different times right now. So I really, really appreciate it. And I'm excited to share your conversations with our community, because I feel like you said, the more access you have to different things that are happening, the more you're going to learn, and especially when you do it with an open heart. So thank you so much for being a part of Empowered Conversations.
Of course, Angela. Thank you for having me. And I will send you those links to my series and how people can get in touch with me. I'll get all that over to you on email. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.